Thank you for taking the time to come along to our supplier briefing session on the print devices and print management services. What we hope to do today is give you a background of the all of government, what all of government is. It's going to be quite light touch. We're mostly going to drive you to www.procurement.gov.nz because there's lots of information on there. We're also going to give a high level objective of the print device and management contract when it was originally established and what we want to achieve by taking it back to the market. And Peter will give you some tips around how to respond and next steps. So just really briefly, most of you might know this already. If you don't, there's a wealth of information out there, especially on www.procurement.gov.nz. But just to give you a quick overview, we spend, as the New Zealand government spends more than $30 billion per year on goods and services, which is about 15% of the GDP for New Zealand. 30 cents of every dollar that the government spends is spent with an external supplier. So purchasing is pretty important to government, and doing it well and getting good value for money is pretty high on our priority list. Just to reiterate that, obviously, if we spend, it's not just all about the purchasing, it's about the management of the contracts once they're in place and continuing to work with suppliers to ensure that we're all focused on the same objectives. There are, in the government procurement reform days, they set up the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment as the functional leader for procurement. So we've got 5 teams within the government procurement branch. There's a commercial pool, a capability team which looks after also syndicated procurement. We've got a policy team which looks after the rules. We've got a legal team, and we've got the collaborative procurement team, which is the team that I'm in, which looks after the all of government contracts. There's 2 other functional leaders that have been approved by Cabinet. So Department of Internal Affairs is the functional leader for ICT, and Ministry of Social Development is the functional leader for property management. So we abbreviate that to PIMCO. We are working closely with both DIA and MSD in their roles as functional leaders to ensure that we're united, and because obviously all our areas overlap, ICT, print, property, they're all quite integrated. Again, there's more information on www.procurement.gov.nz. Any questions at this stage about procurement functional leadership? No? Okay. So part of the procurement functional leadership is that we set the government rules of sourcing, again, they're available on www.procurement. It's an amazing website, you should go there sometime. There's 5 principles that underlie the rules, and these must be followed by the mandated agencies, of which we are one. So it's our responsibility to ensure that we run a fair and transparent process during this procurement process. We're not going to be able to provide individual assistance or advice to suppliers during the RFP, and we can't advise whether or not you should respond to it. That's a decision for you to make in your organisations. Essentially, if you do want to correspond with us during the RFP process, you must go through GETS, which is where our RFP will be posted, and there's a function on that for you to ask questions. So now, in terms of the market that we're operating in for print, we understand that New Zealand's quite a small country, and we have quite a few suppliers, not many suppliers, within the print market, all competing for similar business. So we thought it was a good opportunity to get Liz to give us a brief overview of the Commerce Act and how it might apply in this circumstance. So, Liz.
So I'm going to talk broadly about the 2 different sorts of things that get you into trouble. The first one is price fixing. There are 4 ways of doing that. And the second one is agreements that substantially lessen competition. In terms of price fixing and for the agreements that substantially lessen competition, it's kind of a catch-all for something that is much more fluid than what we'd describe as a contractual arrangement. So it can be a contractual arrangement, but it can go right down to understanding, which could be sort of a nudge or a wink. So the legal test around this stuff comes down to this meeting of the minds. So for a meeting of the minds to occur, it basically means at least 2 people must understand what's going to be done and what the result is going to be if they each act in a certain way. So for the meeting of the minds, everyone must understand what's going to happen and what they're going to do and what's going to result from it. So that's the legal test. It says there it can be oral or written. I guess, as I've mentioned, it can also be sort of a nudge and a wink, which isn't even oral. It can legally be right down to the little stuff. So there are 4 ways to fix price, and we'll go through each of them individually just now, so I won't linger here. So for a price fixing agreement, this basically involves an agreement to fix the price, unsurprisingly. That can be any part of the price. It doesn't need to be the whole price. It can be about the margin, it can be about component pricing, so it's not necessarily just about the whole price. Fixing the price doesn't mean just fixing the price either. It can sort of mean controlling the price, putting ceilings in, agreeing to maintain the price, or looking to restrict discounts, things like that. So movement in the competition. So it's not just about the whole price, it can include any collusion on any component of the pricing. So here's one that came about reasonably recently. You might have heard about it. So 3 Auckland outlets, only 2 big competitors in this market. In fact, I've got some of the experts on this market in the room at the back, so I better get this right. These guys ran this cartel for a little while, agreed on the cost plus that was going to be 8%. When they got found out, $1.8 million in fines. Pretty steep. Plus some that were aimed at individuals. 5,000, that's actually quite low. The penalty for an individual can go up to 500,000. So bid rigging, obviously one that we're quite interested in the procurement process. So there are 4 basic types of this. Bid rotation, this is more or less a pattern in who wins the bids. It can be as simple as taking turns. It might be a bit more sort of complicated than that to sort of avoid detection. I think I had one that was sort of 2 + 1 + 3 or something like that. It was hard to spot, but basically there's a pattern to the winning. Bid suppression means that somebody just won't bid. So somebody who might be in the market will choose not to bid in order for the other person to win. Bid withdrawal, so people can get into the game but then pull themselves out of the game, same thing, so that someone else wins. And cover bidding. So we'll get to cover pricing in a minute, which is a bit different, but cover bidding basically means you submit a tender that's never intended to win. So for one reason or another, it's never going to be a winning bid. So next sort, market sharing or allocation. Again, it's more or less what it sounds like. The parties to the agreement to collude either break up the market based on products, based on customers, or based on something like geographic region, and they agree that they will only service those customers and agree not to compete. As it says here, it can be quite difficult to spot, but that doesn't mean that it isn't found from time to time, and good market analysis and good procurement processes can pick that up, and often that is where it's found. Output restriction, so slightly more technical, where the aim is where supply is reduced in order to impact demand. So a case reasonably recently in wood treatment basically meant that there were 2 suppliers, one who supplied sort of agriculture businesses, farmers, with fence posts, and one who supplied home builders and stuff with timber for framing and decks. And they basically said, right, we'll keep our customers, we'll agree not to compete on price, we'll just, we won't compete for the customers either, we'll operate in those spheres alone, and it more or less meant that we all paid more for our houses and farmers paid more for their fence posts. So there were a number of people involved in that, and they did get fined, I think, $7.5 million.
just over 7.5 million for those offences. So cover pricing. Quite common, or not common, but it pops up in the construction space at the moment. So we've got a competitor who wants to tender for a project, and quite often in the government space we have suppliers who want to keep their name in the game, so they want to be able to tender, but for various reasons, and I think I've got another slide on this, they are pushed for time, or they don't necessarily want to win the bid. So they work together to provide pricing and work up a bid. Usually one puts it, just takes the other's pricing and marks it up a bit, not always across the board, so sometimes in just certain parts of the bid. Then the bidder submits that bid as their own pricing. Why would you do that? Good question. If the customer is particularly difficult, you might not want to win the bid. If there's a particular project that isn't very attractive for some reason, it's a long way away, it's going to add cost, it's going to be demanding in other ways, you might already have enough business and be unable to actually deliver to it. And as I say, this is the one I've been running into recently, people don't have enough time to put the bid together themselves, so they work together to put a couple of bids together. Cover pricing, not a good idea. So in terms of the legal test for the Commerce Act, there must be 2 or more parties to an agreement. In terms of price fixing, that needs to be 2 competitors. When we get down to the market share stuff, it doesn't need to be competitors. It can be a manufacturer and a supplier. But in this case, must be 2 competitors. They must have that agreement, the meeting of the minds about who's going to do what and what they think the consequences of that are going to be. And it must affect the price of one bid, which it almost certainly does. If you're going to take someone else's price and mark it up, then that's affecting your price. The price that's fixed doesn't need to be the winning bid. So this is one of the legal tests that people get a bit confused about, because normally price fixing is for benefit. In a cover pricing, it's generally not. So even if the winning bid is the losing bid is the one that's fixed, it is still an illegal action. It can make it look like there's competition where there is not. So that's obviously against the intent of the Commerce Act. So more or less, wouldn't do it. The penalties for this stuff are pretty serious. So for an individual, I think I said it was up to $500,000. For a company, it's a bit more serious. It's the greater of $10 million, 3 times the benefit, or if that's too tricky to calculate, it's 10% of turnover. So that can be quite serious, obviously, to your bottom line. And to you, if you have to fork out the $500,000, I wouldn't be too keen on doing that myself. It also raises some other legal risks for you under the Fair Trading Act, so probably to be avoided. So agreements that substantially lessen competition have a few different features. So they can, as I said just a moment ago, they don't have to be between competitors. They can be between people in the supply chain working together. And the agreements that substantially lessen competition, what that means is someone accrues power in the market, or some groups. It doesn't need to be one entity. So there are a couple of tests here. The first is, what is a market? Good question, back to sort of basic economics. So the test that the Commerce Commission used for this is actually one they describe as common sense. I'd sort of agree. They look at what the public think a market is, or what the industry thinks a market is, and they look at old-fashioned supply and demand. So the example they have on their website is about margarine and butter. And if it's an effective substitute, then they're considered in the same market. So they have the way a market is defined is a bit loose, but I think if you had a common sense think about it, you'd probably be on the right track. In terms of a significant impact on the market, they take 3 things into account. They take the amount of competition before the agreement, the amount after, and they do what they call a counterfactual, which is a Treasury type word, which means the what if. Well, what if it wasn't there? And they do a test that looks at competition over the long run to see what the impact has been, and then they make a determination about whether that's significant. that's all the information I really have on what significant is without going into a couple of cases. I would use reasonableness in thinking about that, and if you're even approaching a situation that might be considered to be significantly impacting the market, I'd probably get some legal advice. There are some exceptions, okay? So there are times when it's absolutely fine to work together, and this is a really, really quick summary of that. I'd go and have a look at the fact sheet if you're wanting to do it. A genuine joint venture, so again, get some legal advice if you're doing a JV, set it up well with clear purpose to avoid getting into sticky areas. Certain price recommendations, so where there are trade associations with many, many parties participating in them, they can have some impact on industry, and joint buying. So if people are doing procurement together, that's okay, as long as it doesn't sort of inform the end price too much. Obviously, it's getting close with that component stuff, so again, if you're looking to go into it, then I'd get some good advice. The Commission can also authorise an arrangement if it's in the public interest. So some of the big airline ones and things like that, the telecommunications ones, they have a look at and they make determinations about that. There is also a thing called leniency. So if in the incredibly unlikely event that you find yourself in a cartel, there is this legislation that can help you kind of get out of it. So basically there is a thing called leniency. Get out of it is too strong, but leniency does reduce the penalties, and it means that you can get some of your life back. So they offer complete immunity, usually to the first person in the door. You can sometimes get in once they've started an investigation. If you find yourself in a situation like this, I'd just contact them at your earliest opportunity. I guess the basic tips are, if you find yourself in a conversation that's heading down the wrong track, I'd advise you to leave it immediately and express an objection, so that you're not getting into trouble in the first place. If you do find yourself in a situation where you're thinking, hang on a minute, this might not be cool, get some legal advice and go and talk to the Commission. That's all I've got for you. Hopefully we'll get on to some more exciting parts of the presentation now.
I'm really excited to be here. It's such an exciting time for us in print at all of government, moving back into one of the first return to markets, so it's really exciting. So now I'm going to start talking what we're really all here to talk about, it's the print stuff. So I'm not going to talk you through the slide, I'm just going to give you some overview from some of the notes that I've got here. The whole idea of today is to give you some advance warning with the advance notice on Get, so that you're all registered and can all get in there and find out more about what's going on. We've worked through some of our thinking already about what we want to do going forward in terms of print, but that's not to say that we're not open to lots of feedback and thoughts from the industry, either during the tender process or even in part of Q&A through this session today. We'll talk to you today about some ideas that we've already got and where we want to take things going forward. Just because we talk about them today doesn't mean they're set in stone, so please bear in mind that as we go to put together the tender, that will be the final document and give some direction of where we want to go. So it's still all reasonably fluid, but not so fluid that we've got no idea. So I hope that kind of gives you a bit of a sense of where we're going. So currently we've got 4 suppliers on the panel. We don't envisage that the panel size will change terribly much, but who knows, that's part of the open process. We want to build on the success of the last 4 years. We think it's been quite a successful contract, certainly in terms of agency feedback. They all seem pretty happy, but we know that there's some things that can be done to make things better. And a lot of that's internal stuff to make it easier for agencies to engage, because at the end of the day, this is all about getting a great outcome for our agencies and the whole government environment. So the objectives that we set out in 2010 haven't fundamentally changed for those of you on the panel now or that responded back then. That hasn't changed a lot, but I'm just going to quickly touch on what they are. Reliable nationwide service and to the agreed service levels, so that's making sure agencies get what they need. So that's really important to us. Cost transparency, so that we can help agencies understand how the costs are all made up, so that we can try and demystify that a little bit for them, stop it being quite as confusing as not just print, but lots of other categories can be, because they're all focused on lots of stuff out there, not just print. That's what we're here to know and love and make easy for them. Competitive unit pricing, so at the end of the day it's all about good value for money as well, so we want to make sure we're delivering that. Adoption of common technical standards, so that's something that we set out to do in the beginning, and it's probably something we haven't embraced and delivered as broadly as we would have wanted to, so that's something we want to make more, we want to enable it more for agencies as we move forward. Achieving agency satisfaction, I've mentioned it in all of those elements. It really is all about the agencies. That's who we're here to try and deliver an outcome for. And being able to manage the information, so understanding spend and purchasing behaviour so we can help agencies make really good decisions around their print and all the related services that go with it. As I said, the contract has been quite successful and the agencies seem pretty happy with it, but we know that there's some opportunities to accelerate continuous improvement as we move through. I think it did work. Never did that. So in the context of the return to the market, a category review was conducted back in November 2013. I'm thrilled to say I wasn't here for that because it was a big, intense 2-day workshop and we had lots of great input. So it was a pick it apart, put it all back together kind of approach to look at how we look at print going forward. We currently have, and I'll talk a bit more about this on the next slide, about 170 agencies excluding schools currently participating in the agreement, which is about 41% of those eligible, which is not bad, but there's a lot of room to move that forward, and that excludes the schools. So that's a whole other kettle of fish that we'd really like to address as part of this process. So in that whole return to market review that we did, there's been some updated market research. Peter's been doing a whole lot of work and he'll talk about that a little bit more in his slides. And there's also been, I guess, a real look back and what is it that we're really trying to achieve. And at the end of the day, we still need print devices. It's about how we enhance that for agencies going forward. So it's not just about a device that sits in a corner quietly and just prints away and doesn't break down. So opportunities for improvement. So some of the things we really want to achieve is how we increase participation. So I said before 41% sign up. It's not bad, but it's not great. So there's some real opportunities there, and we know that some of those challenges are internal, and I'll talk about that a little bit more shortly. We're also looking at how we best describe the scope. So we know that we've talked about devices, which we currently procure from the contracts now, but looking into that managed print services space, and whether that's something you do alone or in a partnership type arrangement, that's for you to look at as you look and prepare for the tender process going forward. Managed content services as well, so that's all about integration, data scraping, linkages into enterprise content management systems, which a lot of agencies are getting into now, linkages into enterprise finance systems, so accounts payable type software, all of those kind of great additional value add things that make life better out in agency land, as we seem to refer to it a lot internally. The other thing is the charging methodologies. I mentioned before about transparency. So transparency is one thing. Being able to stand up to agencies and say, this is the financial benefit of what we've put in front of you is really important to them. So one of the things they always ask, and I know this having come from agency land quite recently, is what's in it for me? Why is this such a good deal? And it's not just about cost, but that is part of the picture. So it's about being able to hand on heart say, actually, this is what's in it for you, and this is what you're going to get out of this. And that's about us working collaboratively with our suppliers to make that happen. So on the next slide is a nice table that gives you a sense of what the participation looks like. So in this public services area, this is the group that's currently under the Crown Entities Act required to participate in all the government contracts. You'll see that 3 of them don't. That'll be because they have existing contracts with an incumbent supplier. Going forward, there's likely to be some changes that will result in the next group also being required to sign up and access all the government contracts. Again, I can't emphasise enough that that's once their existing contracts expire. Now, that's not a directive to you all to go racing out to all of those agencies and get them signed up for longer. That's about us wanting to work with you to make sure they're getting the best outcome, and a lot of that is through, we believe, the all the government contracts that are in place, and that's not just for print, that's for all of them. So one of the things that we want to do going forward is we want to make it easier, and we want to do that working with our suppliers that are successful on the panel. We think that's really important, and we think that's what agencies are looking for. Make it really simple for us. We've got lots of other stuff to worry about, not just all these great all the government contracts that you guys put in place. So one of the other key things is 41%, as I said, pretty good, not flash. We want to work with our successful suppliers to help transition those agencies that are already on contracts with them onto all the government benefits. So that might not necessarily be, race over and give them the best price available on the contract. It might be looking at what the right combination of solution is to make it work for them and for the supplier as well. We also want to be able to encourage secondary procurement processes where that makes sense for them, so that they don't feel like they're just jumping across from what they currently have. Because a lot of them are ready to move forward and look at those additional services that I spoke about earlier. So some of the issues that we think have slowed participation down, the documentation, as I said, we've got to make it really simple. It should be simple for them. And when I say them, I mean agencies. The charging methodologies, making those really easy to understand. Because print, as you all know, I don't need to tell all of you this, it can be quite a complex area in terms of working out all the different levers that impact the pricing that goes off to an agency. So it's really important that we help them understand what that is. Bearing in mind that they're not sitting there loving print the way we all do in the room on a daily basis. They're busy looking after lots of other stuff as well. So we need to make it really easy. And look at how we can work with you around the incentives that we know that are provided to customers and to your sales reps. Because we know that those are valuable to those people, and we need to just get some transparency around that and understand how we can work with you to make that actually still work. Because we know that the world's not going to change. So we just want to work with you to make sure that it doesn't, disable what we're trying to achieve. We want to help enable what we're trying to achieve. And now you've had enough of me, you get to listen to the lovely Peter. Peter.
I've had a good number of you already. I started with MB around about 10 weeks ago, so one of the first things I did was catch up with as many of the incumbents and other significant providers in the market as I could. I'm probably going to talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that's already been touched on. The word collaboration has been used a couple of times, and part of the reason for doing the Commerce Commission part was actually we see the opportunity in the managed print services area for organisations, probably from within the print industry but also outside, to potentially collaborate to help accelerate some of the objectives that DIA have set with their strategy and action plan. I'll talk a little bit more about the schedules that are likely to be in the contract, but they're really there to accelerate visibility of the services that many of you can provide, and you could provide more of if you're working collaboratively with potentially others in the market. The first time this contract went to market, we were very controlling around the specification of machines. So it was, I don't know, many of you will be aware, you got to nominate six different machines. This time round, we're going to look to move towards more of a standards-based approach, which will provide you a little bit more scope to provide more visibility of a greater range of machines. The contract will be more outcomes-based, so we're looking at agencies' requirements being met. We're not going to be as concerned about how you might meet those. So we're going to try and create a little bit more flexibility within the contract for you to meet business needs in different ways. I spend a lot of time reading Gartner stuff, and they seem to come up with a new piece of jargon every 2 years. But so the managed print services were all the rage 5 years ago. Now it seems to be managed content services. But probably in the tender documentation we'll refer to it largely as digitisation. So helping automate manual documents, digitise manual documents and automate manual workflows. Some really good examples of that have happened already in a number of agencies. And one of the focuses for this COE, the Centre of Expertise, going forward will be to promote some of that stuff more around other agencies. So they've got a visibility of what some of the potential benefits of working more closely with you guys may be. One of the things we need to clean up internally is the reporting. It's been difficult over the first 4 years of the contract, but there's been quite a lot of learnings. So we will be endeavouring to make that a little bit more straightforward on both sides, so that we have more valuable information to provide for agencies, and you guys don't have to work quite so hard to generate that information. This will be laid out, but when we're talking about supporting DIA as the functional leaders for ICT across government, these are the actions that are set out in their strategy. Interestingly enough, I think as I was doing all my reading around the market and what extra value-added services you can provide, these ones seem to come through pretty consistently. So under no illusions that you guys have the capability to actually make quite a big contribution to accelerating some of the change that DIA are endeavouring to make across the state sector. Okay, timing of the RFP. We're looking at releasing the RFP into the market in early December. We'll leave a period open for questions up until probably just before Christmas, and then we'll close that off probably until around about the 12th, 19th of January. That's basically recognising that there'll be no one here at MB largely during that period to answer your questions, but that post-Christmas period in January will be back on deck, as most of you will be. The objective for releasing the tender document before Christmas was just to give you an opportunity to start to do some of your planning for the new year around having resources available, having a bit of a view as to what's been required in the tender. The close date will be around in mid-February, but as I say, queries will be probably up until a week before the close date. I've just reopened the advance notice that was on Gets. So as a result of today, if you registered, actually registered is not the right word. Anyone Gets subscribed? If you've subscribed to the advance notice, you can now go on and post any questions that you may have that have come out of today. We can then respond to those and they'll be available to everyone who's subscribed in the same way as will be the case when the tender's posted. So we'll be relying on Gets. I borrowed this presentation. The file size limits are huge, so you don't need to worry too much about that. I did make a note of it. I think it was described as me as a 2-hour feature film would be fine. That would prefer you didn't actually upload anything that size. I'll be trying to keep the tender as tight as I can because evaluating these responses is about as much fun as it is preparing them. So we'll keep it pretty tight. We'll be doing a qualitative and price assessment separately. So the first part of the assessment will be based on the non-price attributes of your proposals. Those that make it through that shortlisting phase will then look at the pricing proposal that you've put forward. Okay, I'm assuming you've all registered on Gets. It's a new Gets system, so there's a little bit of effort required to get your new log-on details, but once you're in, it's pretty intuitive. We'll teach you to suck eggs. When you are putting your tender responses together, please put a response for each of the questions. We work through a fairly rigorous process, so if you don't provide a response to a question, you don't get any marks for that question. So it's important that you do complete your responses thoroughly. There'll be an intention to respond. That's really just to give us an idea of the number of responses that we're expecting in. In past years, it's actually been very useful when you don't get a response through. You can actually call that supplier up and say, deadline's gone, where's your response? And you'll often find that, well, in the past you found it sitting at reception or it's jammed in the firewall, or so it is really important that you register your intent to respond. It also enables us to give our evaluators a bit of a heads up as to the time commitment that they're going to have to make in order to evaluate the responses. Submitting the questions via Gets, that's all around keeping David happy. So we want to have everyone having access to the same information. If you have a question that you believe is commercially sensitive or proprietary, flag it as such, and then I'll have a talk with David and we'll come back to you as to whether we believe that is the case. And then you'll have a choice of actually whether the answer be provided openly or not at all. And don't be late. So the gates closes off, and once the door comes down, the door comes down. The GET subscription codes were 43 and 45 for those of you who haven't registered. That'll just mean that you get the advance notice through your email. I'll get the ball rolling with the questions. I'm quite interested in your view of Buyers Lab, which was something I came across in the research I was doing, as far as an independent entity that was testing the hardware that you guys produce. Does anyone have any views on the validity of the testing that Buyers Lab put out?
Here's how much you pay them.
Your gear will be quite good then.
I don't have a view how much.
Does anyone not put their main equipment through Buyers Lab? Yep, you guys not? Okay. That was my one leading question. I hope you're feeling more comfortable. Is there anything that we've touched on today that you'd like a little bit more information about, a little bit of clarity about?
The Buyers Lab thing, though, there's some anomalies there. Like it's largely done in the US and in Europe. So if you've got Asian derivative models, they're not necessarily
Yeah.
They can get lost.
Yeah, no, the pricing comparison's not done for our part of the world. It's more the functional specifications and standards. I mean, the standards that were included in the initial tender are not too bad, so they'll probably be quite similar. I'll be doing a bit of research.
Peter, once you've selected the vendors to negotiate the price with, how long are you going to leave the window open for negotiations to occur? From 4 years ago, you left quite a big window for some other suppliers, and
yeah.
So what's your thoughts on that? Keep it even and fair.
It's going to be quite interesting, given that at the moment the intention is to put the contract out with 5 schedules. So I'm seeing the core schedules as the printing and scanning equipment, the equipment servicing and maintenance. So the pricing in that part will be pretty clear. I don't think that should be too difficult. The value-adding schedules will be the software as a single schedule, consulting and professional services, and the managed print or scanning solution, so people on site. I don't expect that each of you will put in all of the same software solutions. I don't expect each of you will put in all of the same professional services solutions. So it'll depend a little bit on the size of some of the responses we receive and the variance between them. The core stuff shouldn't take too long. I think we will look towards the revised savings methodology for the all of government contracts across the board, not just in print, is generally looking at best available corporate rates provided by suppliers who are selected, which is compared to an all of government rate. So we like to be able to measure that saving.
Sorry, Peter. I just wanted to just hang back on something that you were saying just there, and to confirm that you won't need to be able to provide all of the services that we're looking for. We will be happy for joint responses with, if you want to, do a joint venture with another provider that can fulfil all of the services, and together you can provide all the services. Or we're also happy for suppliers who don't provide all of the services. Ensuring that, of course, that we've got the core services that are provided, and then additional services as you may be able to provide. So you don't feel that you need to be able to provide everything that we have asked for to be competitive. That's the point that I wanted to make.
Does that make sense?
Yes, no? Yeah. I mean, I know some of you provide sector-specific software solutions. You'll be able to provide those. Some of your competitors won't have an equivalent product.
You'd like to tip more agencies into the all of government contract.
Something I didn't emphasise quite enough, yeah.
Why? What's wrong with how they're operating currently?
The first time round we identified that agencies saved anywhere between 4 and 40%, depending often on their size and the level of attention they'd paid to the contract that was in place. The assumption being that many of the agencies that aren't on the all-of-government contract are still paying considerably more than they could be.
Given the nature of the panel post this process, you've got 4 current incumbents, we're one of them. Between the 4 of us, we probably cover 90% of all the eligible agencies, probably 80-something% of the total market. We've all invested heavily in terms of resources to support all of government. We've given away our margins to compete in all of government. The pie is the pie. Why would you think about expanding the panel further? Or are you thinking of expanding the panel further or reducing it from where it is today?
We haven't made a decision. I think it's unlikely to grow for some of the reasons you've pointed out.
Sure.
The benefits of when the cost savings work stream was set up when the procurement reform program kicked off in 2009. That particular stream of work was around aggregating volume to realise savings on behalf of government as a whole. It's not a particularly sophisticated procurement approach, but you pile it high and you buy it cheaper. So by pushing it out to a greater number of suppliers, we're actually undermining that intent. That said, in the managed print services area, so software and consulting services, a lot of that stuff is actually project specific and leads on to other work and a deeper relationship with the clients that you may or may not be working with as providers of device. So there won't be a requirement that if you buy your MFD fleet from a particular provider that you will then have to use them for all of your managed print services. You may choose to look at some business process re-engineering, digitalisation type initiatives with another member of the panel.
A lot of the current statements of work that are out there under the existing agreements are due to expire over the next 2 to 3 years. So there is a natural expiry in a lot of the, device relationships that are out there for them to consider whether they should be looking at a secondary procurement process across what will be the new panel, whether that's with the incumbent suppliers or a mix of incumbents and new suppliers or what that looks like. And we believe that that will not only be about looking at their devices but about looking at print as a whole and some of these additional services that we're looking to enable agencies to understand more, because we think a lot of it's about education, about helping them understand what's actually available to them and what the benefits are. And so that's not just, when I say benefits, I'm not just talking about, getting that great price for the cost per copy rate that's out there. I'm talking about the benefits of internal rationalisation that they get through doing things like automating their accounts payable and all those good projects. So we think it's a lot broader than just thinking about the devices. And that's for us to get our head around too. We've been struggling to get our head around that a lot as well. So I think we need to look at it a bit more broadly than just how it looks right now.
Do you guys have a view on the demarcation, between managed content service, in layman's terms, fancy scanning and stuff, and then, really getting pretty close to the edge of the ICT category? I think, is there a clear demarcation between, because, all of a sudden we're going to start tripping over each other.
Yep.
Into both categories.
Yep.
And I guess the other point to that, to continue on that string, is in that lot 4 spaces, that managed print on-site, off-site print management, wholesale, wide form, you name it. All of a sudden you're starting to dip into the consumable space with Office Max and all those other guys with paper and whatever else. Where's the dividing line between you play in your sandpit and you don't?
yeah. Around the digitalisation and that sort of electronic content management, I probably wouldn't see you guys providing the electronic content management systems, but potentially providing the integration into them. Paper's one that's still up in the air. What was the other thing you mentioned?
Outsourced print.
Outsourced print. We've certainly
offset print.
Yep, certainly talking about won't be offset, but potentially portal type solutions for off-site print, overflow print for volumes or binding that's not really, or can be done more cost effectively off-site.
But not offset.
No.
You talk about state services potentially becoming compulsory participants. We talk about education, but not so much your approach to education. So is this more of a promotion of the panel into that education space, where it's still effectively the discretion, or is this going to be a more mandated approach?
Schools are not covered by the changes to the Crown Entities Act, But we will be looking in the tender to work with providers who are willing to help us transition schools under the contract, because we do believe there's quite significant savings there that aren't being realised.
Just to confirm on that scope, we're still really keen for you guys to give us your thoughts about what should be in scope and what shouldn't be. If you think that we've got it wrong, or you think that there's something that we're not considering that should be in there, then we want to hear about it.
I think one of the challenges that the incumbent suppliers have had, without colluding obviously, has been, and I think we've discussed that with you guys in the past, has been from the COEs, from the top down, just this sole focus on the managed print or the CPC rate has been the be-all and end-all. And as this guy in front of me I've never met before, suggested, the margin's just gone, right? And commercial forces and market forces, and the price has gone down, and that's fine. I guess all of us in this room are probably sitting there thinking a lot for bit where we actually kind of like recouped some margin is now going to get arms and legs wrapped around and the margin chopped out of that. And so my point of the story was it'd be good to see in a future state a better understanding or a more even view on straight cost, straight rental or lease or whatever you want to call it, because the reality is there's a perception in the AOG community that says I'm a school in West Taranaki, I do 2 copies a month, I will pay 2 cents a copy and get 5 Ferraris. And someone who's idiot up in a panel will supply that. Unfortunately, we do, right? And so I guess, I've been kind of throwing it out there and saying, well, is there a way that we can say, no, you just don't trigger the point for a full managed print. It's not viable. It doesn't cost. But hey, let's take the advantage of the buying group of AOG and rent that thing for $100 a month or whatever it is. Because the reality is there's a few contracts out there, some are mine, some are his, some are wherever else's, that just don't make any sense at all.
Yep. And it's a challenge that we've actually been made aware of, and it's one we do have to think through. I don't think we've got an answer yet. So we can influence agencies, but we can't control them. But there may be something we can do in the contract that provides you potentially a little bit more leverage to have that discussion at the point it's required.
But I mean, could as part of that master agreement that becomes contract, small, medium, or large, whatever it is. If you're this size, you don't have access to the managed print. You only have access to the shopping list that rent can get.
Yeah, no, potentially, yeah.
And that you guys can control that and manage that.
Yep.
Because that's what you guys have on the contract.
And it's that kind of thinking from you guys that we want to hear, because we can hear the anecdotal stories and we're coming up with our own solutions to them. But at the end of the day, it's got to be a solution that works for you. And then I hark back to one of the points that I made in my slides about contract management being really important when we're spending 30 cents of every dollar on external suppliers. And part of that is sustainability of supply. So we want our suppliers to stay around. So how can we work with you guys to make sure that it is attractive to you and you do want the business and we get something out of it as well?
I mean, particularly the suppliers that are on the panel now are international suppliers, right? We're not going anywhere in a hurry, right?
Yeah.
I guess, as I've said before, you guys have the ability, particularly in this new iteration of the contract, to enforce better behaviours of the panel, let alone the buying community, by enforcing, no, you can't have access to that particular model of purchasing because of blah, blah, blah. And I guess if it's left open during the tendering process and I'm the only idiot who says, no, I'm only going to let, blah, 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 then I've kind of missed out on a market opportunity, because I come back to my point, I get there's market forces, right? But I guess my question is, and I'll soon see it in the tender, I guess, is there an openness from you guys to look at that kind of modelling where you guys become a bit more regulatory in the contract and the way it looks coming forward, as opposed to kind of the Wild West?
I guess the question back would be if we limited the options to a smaller agency and they came to you and said, don't want that, I want CPC, would you provide the service that they wanted to win the contract anyway?
Well, if you've got it in the MSA, right, I can't. If you, I mean, as I'm saying, you guys have the ability to bulk it down. If it's in the MSA and it's in blood and it's the same for everyone on the panel, then I'm sorry, I have no control over that. You know, and you know, you've got the triggers to be able to, you know, to caveat that, you know, there's no variations, there's no, you know, you can't vary that out of scope and off, you can't make that a part of your statement of work. You guys have the ability to do that.
Yep, no, it's a thought certainly worth considering. Yep. Any others? Those are the sorts of things we're quite keen to hear.
I mean, I just support what Ricardo Jaime said.
Well, what's his name, you mean?
If we overlay the education sector and look at the viability of supporting that sector, most of them are very small businesses, you know, effectively, in remote locations with very low requirements, and it just doesn't suit the managed print services contract. So if you want us to be able to service those sorts of organisations and give them best access and the best possible deal, we've got to do it in a way that's sustainable and in a way that we can, you know, maintain the standards we need to. And frankly, rolling out managed print services to organisations that can't viably sustain them is not going to get anyone anywhere. So if we want to engage that sector, we've got to make it a bit easier for us to engage them.
So where does small, what's small?
I mean, you know, of the 2,400, most of them would have one print device, probably no need for any software solutions, and they're, you know, they're a small.
So single devices.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's. Yeah.
Add to that if it's 3 hours drive from home base, it just doesn't make any sense.
Okay. Yep. So distance is an issue too. Yep. Any other thoughts or areas that we need to be thinking a bit more deeply about? I mean, there is the opportunity, obviously, to come back through GETS on the advance notice.
Terminations.
Yeah, no, it's something we'd like to include in the revised statement of work. So it's something that's caused a bit of angst for agencies. I'm not sure what the new government's plan is as far as amalgamating or pulling apart agencies, but it often becomes an issue when that happens.
What's your intent now as it was 4 years ago?
As to whether there should be a termination provision? Yeah, that it's upfront and explicit at the beginning of the statement of work, that it's a costed sliding scale termination fee. He says in draft.
that can't be, that won't be incremental to the base charge. So it's cost of sale.
I guess that's something that we'd have to work through and, you know, keen to understand how it works.
But this is supplied when not being RFP, isn't it?
Well, so yeah. So
It'll be in the template documents, yeah. So the engagement when you're down to an agency relationship. So yeah, so not termination of the, yeah. So statements of work with specific agencies.
So I mean, yeah, 4 years ago or 5, whatever it was, you know, the intent specifically was that there would be no terminations dealt with. And that was articulated in buyer's guides, you know, all the pre-qual stuff to us, you know, everything. And kind of fast forward to now, sounds the Wild West, but you know, there's buyouts, there's this going on, there's that behaviour, there's this activity going on. So getting a position clear up front. And if we are going to allow terminations, I would suggest that it has to be incremental to cost of sale.
When you say cost of sale?
So in the past, when it kind of started, this behaviour started occurring when there was buyouts. They were saying, well, you can buy that contract out, but you can't go above the maximum rate. You have to wear it as cost of sale, right? So you can't, add that settlement on to your base charge and now charge Peter Cooper 5 cents a page.
Oh, okay, so you're carrying it through to
So
you.
if you,
Yep.
in front of you, it's the
You're passing on the termination fee to the client to pay
Yep.
in the next iteration.
If they can still show a benefit and savings, then why not? But, again, it creates the wrong supplier behaviour and the wrong end user behaviour, because they then have this perception that they can just change at will, and that Bob down the road will fix all my problems and make them all go away. And the termination convenience type clause again creates the wrong kind of end user behaviour. And if we're now talking about the relationship being deeper with regards to content management and the like, Mr. Customer, sorry, I can't pick up my blah server or whatever it is and just exit the building stage left. We're kind of going out of that commoditised toilet paper type supply product into a more deep relationship. The termination thing then needs to be thought through.
Yeah, I mean that's the opportunity we're hoping to create in the new contract, that you do like your ICT cousins. They want to become more integrated, more difficult to exit. But equally, agencies under the current contract have struggled when they've needed or wanted to get out of, and it's largely been the provision of MFDs, and it's often been as a result of agency mergers or splits. So we'd like to be able to factor that in so that agencies can standardise across, have a single provider rather than having to manage two providers for an extended period of time.
We would like to see a far higher degree of governance and communication, that if there's deviations from the intent or the behaviours that are set up initially, either being authorised or tolerated, then that is more widely communicated to the panel group, because frankly I felt at times we're operating on a whole bunch of different playing fields.
Yeah.
It's your job to centralise that communication and make sure that we're all playing under the same rules, and that hasn't been the case universally in this round, in this current contract. So
yeah, no, fair point.
Yep.
What are your thoughts around CAT's finance rates moving forward?
My own thoughts on draft are that they should be reviewed 6 monthly or 12 monthly. I think it's fairly unreasonable to whack in a fixed interest rate that applies for the duration of the contract. But that's something that I'll need to socialise and get some feedback from the category advisory group. And I mean, your views on that? Do you have...
Yeah, pretty similar to yours, really. Yeah, if it can be reviewed, that would be awesome. Just to give a bit of flexibility on that.
Yeah. I mean, my thinking on it was that whilst that was reviewed, it wasn't for business that you've won. So once the rate's in, but for new business, there's the opportunity to have the amended rate apply.
Peter, is the savings, one of the objectives out of this, is that values-based savings, on the back of accounts payable automation and those sorts of things, and getting more out of devices and solutions, or is it a lot about reducing current service costs or cost per copy?
Sorry, I went off on a tangent while I was listening, but yeah, we certainly wouldn't. We're not keen to see that the value that's for the low cost per copy that's in place now escalating. We'd love to think that would stay the same or improve potentially. The bit that hasn't been done particularly well is around, and I think some of you guys were in probably quite a strong position to do it, was around those cost avoidance savings. So particularly in larger agencies where you've gone in and gone through printer optimisation, we've never actually tracked or reported the savings associated with all that kit that's gone out the door, and the cost of consumables and the cost of service. And there's a few of those one-off cost avoidance type savings that don't get reported, and it reflects well on you guys, it reflects well on the contract, but we've kind of ignored them. So the focus has been cost per copy. Again, around the managed print services, when you're getting into these software solutions, increased digitalisation, there's generally an agency business case associated with that type of work. And generally there's a benefits realisation statement within there, but we don't see any of that. You guys might not either, but it would be good to start to report that up, because they make great case studies and that helps accelerate digitalisation across the sector. Okay, there's a couple of really good areas to And thank you for being open and sort of raising those to talk about, because it does help, and I think it's healthy that you do it in a forum where you're all listening to each other. As I say, going forward, if you've got any subsequent questions or you'd like clarifications on anything that we've said today, post it up through GETS, through the advance notice, and then we can respond, and it'll be available to everyone who's subscribed to the advance notice.